On this episode of Hockey Inside Out, has Galchenyuk finally found his groove? And is Daniel Carr here to stay? Welcome to Hockey Inside Out. I am your host, Adam Susser, and this week on the show we have Stu Cowan, Chris Nilan, and back joining us from recrutes.ca, Mr. Brian Wilde. Thanks for joining us, Brian.
A pleasure.
Okay, this is what we're going to be talking about on today's show. Number one, did Alex Galchenyuk turn the corner during the Habs' 10-1 win over the Detroit Red Wings? Number two, were you impressed by the Habs' performance against the Blues Tuesday night? Number three, what has surprised you most about rookie Charles Hudon's play this season? Number four, how does Max Pacioretty not get a single point in the 10-1 win over Detroit? And number five, has Daniel Carr earned a regular spot in the Canadiens' fourth line? Let's begin. If there's one consistent theme during Alex Galchenyuk's career, it's that the Russian-American is consistently inconsistent. He's either wowing fans with his elite puck-moving and scoring abilities, or wandering around the ice looking like a small child who just lost his mommy. During last Saturday night's 10-1 dismantling of the Detroit Red Wings, Alex Galchenyuk registered 4 assists. Do you think that this game will be looked at as a turning point in his season?
It looked like it might have been. And then they played the Blues.
Yeah.
And, he got 4 assists. In the game against the Blues, he was almost missing in action. And they're playing against a big team, the big boys. And he didn't show me anything in that game. I thought he might have with the 4 assists against Detroit. But everybody looked good against Detroit. And then they played the Blues, and it was a little bit of a different story.
I think what's going to happen with Alex is what has always happened with Alex is that the coaching staff and management is never going to really feel he's an upper echelon player until he handles the defensive side of things. And against St. Louis, he had a defensive moment that broke down. And once again, you could see old Alex come in, that inconsistency that you're talking about, Adam. And if he doesn't get on the good side of the puck all the time, then he's always going to be that player that just gets looked at as second tier. And he should be first tier by now, right, Chris?
Yeah, I think he should be. But again, it's the defensive side. Sometimes you can live with the mistakes, but simple things like last night against St. Louis, they had the puck in the corner behind the net. They were battling, defensemen were battling, and he had his rear end right against the boards, waiting for the puck, hoping his team won that battle and they could get him the puck. Meanwhile, St. Louis comes up with the puck, and the defenseman sneaks right inside him because he's on the weak side now, and it turns into a great scoring chance. Those are things. He does not score enough or do enough offensively to be able to say, okay, we'll live with his 3 glaring errors a night defensively.
And he doesn't have any excuses now because he's been playing with good players. I mean, Jonathan Drouin's been out with a lower body injury, but they were together for quite a while. He's been on the number 1 lines and getting a lot of ice time. So it's, Alex, show what you can do. And as you said, the game against Detroit, he looked 4 assists, the first 4-point night of his career, but then he didn't follow it up.
There are enough points to go around in the Detroit game for everyone.
Well, almost everyone.
Almost everyone.
We'll get to that later. Despite the losing 4-3 against the Blues on Tuesday night, were you impressed by the Canadiens' performance? What do you think, Stu?
Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, well, I was happy the way they battled back. I guess the one drawback, you could look at it as a positive, the 3 goals come from defensemen. No forward scored. But at least they didn't roll over them when they were down 3-1. They battled back. But again, those little lapses end up killing you. The first goal, for instance, Plekanec's behind the net with the puck carrier, and Jeff Petrie jumps. The guy's not going to score from below the goal line, behind the net. You got to cover who's in front, and you end up with 2 guys going on one and someone alone in front of the net. Those things will kill you against big, strong teams that can score goals.
Well, St. Louis, the Habs went 12 minutes into the game without getting a shot on goal. Then they were totally dominated in the second period. They were lucky to come out of it thanks to Andrew Shaw winning a couple of big faceoffs right to Shea Weber for the goals. But they didn't give up. I guess that would be the one thing you could say. The Canadiens, they fought back. They made a game of it. It looked like they might get blown out at one point, and they ended up only losing by 1 goal on sort of a fluky goal, the winning goal by St. Louis. So on that part, it's good. But again, the Canadiens they're not, the Blues I think have 3 players under 6 feet and 200 pounds. The Canadiens have like 8. And it was big boys against the small boys, and I think that was part of the result.
I think that what the St. Louis game showed is exactly where the Montreal Canadiens are. They put 5 wins together, but who they beat were teams that were really struggling twice. Detroit, who were terrible. Buffalo, terrible. Ottawa, terrible right now. Beat a Columbus team that's pretty good, but then you played the big boys, as you said, and then the big problems start, even though they were very competitive. When you look at the first 10 games versus now, they've really, really recovered from those first 10 when they were just so abysmal. They were the worst team in the NHL probably. So yes, they have improved, but they're certainly not upper echelon, and last night proved it. So they're somewhere better than the bad hockey teams, but they're certainly not up to the good hockey teams. They're somewhere in the middle of that.
When you're a mediocre team like the Habs are right now, a 500 team, you have to beat the bad teams.
Yeah.
So they have done that. That's a good thing that they did. They won against teams that they were supposed to win against. But it's tough when they play the top teams. It's a tough
They
fight
can
for them.
compete, but they can't win. I think last night's result was a perfect reflection of where they are.
Well, and Carey Price, if he lets in more than 2 goals.
Yeah, that's a loss, usually.
Do you think they are the team that they have been the last 5-6 games since Price's return?
I don't.
More so than before, or they
No. I don't think they're a 5 of 6 team.
Not
even
a 5
if
of 6, but
even if they play poor opposition.
Will they be able to maintain beating those teams that are not so good? Maybe sneak into the playoffs.
Well, they've been in that run. They did it 100% of the time, and I think they can beat weak teams 60 to 65% of the time, but will lose to good teams 65% of the time. So, just as Stu said, they're basically just slightly over 500. Where do you think they stand overall?
I think they're a middle of the road team.
Yeah.
They're showing it right now, and it was great to see those 5 wins. But again, you got to look at the opposition. One team, Columbus, you would think that they might have a tough time, and history says they've had a tough time with them. But yeah, I think they're kind of middle of the road team right now until I think they get a number 1 center in here, and Juin is healthy, and this team's healthy. That's what we're going to see every night.
Well, every team goes through slumps. The Blues came in here; they'd lost 3 in a row, had 1 win in their last 5. Every team goes through slumps. So the Canadiens they said that they'll maybe squeeze into the playoffs, but if they do, you see a similar fate to last year. They'll run into a good team and they'll go out early.
Okay. It's Charles Hudon's rookie season. He's 4-8-12 in about 28 games, 27-28. That's impressive if he could keep that up. Do you think he'll be able to keep that up? What has impressed you most or surprised you most about Charles Hudon so far this year?
His physicality. I mean, we knew he had the offensive skills from what he had done in the American Hockey League. He can put the puck in the net. He's got good vision. He's got great with the puck. I mean, Claude Julien's been using him on a point position on the power play, but he's physical. He's not afraid to throw his weight around. He doesn't pick his spots. He'll hit anybody, big defenseman. So that's the thing that's really surprised me is he has a little bit of Brendan Gallagher in him with better skills. And I see a bright future for him moving forward. I wondered about him when he came up. Is he one of those guys who's really good in the AHL but just can't make that next step? But I think he can, and the reason I think he can is because of the physical play that he also brings to his game as a guy who's not that big.
I would have wondered and worried that he wasn't going to find himself impacting the game enough, just kind of float around the game without
you notice
being
him when he's
in
on
the
the ice,
game.
yeah.
Exactly, you notice him. But what has surprised me most is his defensive ability, because we heard year after year after year he was a one-dimensional player, and over the 3 years that he was in either Laval or St. John's, he really improved himself in that area, that his defensive game is not a liability, and I was certain when he came up here it was going to be a liability, which would eventually put him in the Galchenyuk-like doghouse, and it hasn't happened at all. That's been my biggest surprise for sure.
Yeah, I thought he might have been kind of like a Svenan type guy, and maybe get a look here and there and then get sent back down, eventually move. But, I think he's done really well. I think the biggest attribute this kid has is his desire and his drive to want to be a Montreal Canadien and want to make it in the NHL and want to prove people wrong. That's what, he has the talent, but I think that's what's got him here, and that's what's going to keep him here.
You're right, he wants to be a Canadian. I remember after he scored his first 2 goals in Ottawa, he was telling me his dad's office, he has a shrine to all his hockey stuff. Can you imagine your father and your kids playing for the Montreal Canadiens, and you're a French Quebecer, and that, the first 2 goals, every time he scores a goal, how he salutes, he looks up in the sky in honor of his friend who was killed by a drunk driver walking home from a party. So he's been a really good story, and as Claude Julien said the other day after practice, he's been good since day one, and he's gotten better since day one. So it's, as I said, I see a bright future for him.
Going back to Saturday night's game, the 10-1 win over Detroit, here's some interesting stats for you. Out of the 18 Canadian skaters on the ice, 14 registered a point. More interesting,
Max,
out of all the forwards, only 1 didn't register a point. That was Max Pacioretty. What do you make of that?
I'm kind of glad he didn't get any points because if he did, people would say he only scores against the bad team. They're always going to find something with Max. And he certainly hasn't played well from a goal scoring standpoint. There's no question about it. There's always talk, if Max doesn't score goals, what else does he do? Well, he kills penalties or scores goals. He doesn't have that other part of his game. He's not always going to go in there and bang people. It's just not him. He's never done it. He's not going to start now. He's not a Cam Neely. But he's certainly got to get scoring goals because it does not help this team the way he's playing right now.
All right, I've been writing Call of the Wild for about 7 years, first at CTV and now at Recruits. And it seems like every time I write Wild Goats, Max Pacioretty is playing very poor hockey. Max only does one thing, and that's score goals. And when Max doesn't score goals, Max isn't much of a hockey player. And as soon as I write that, about a week later, he's got 4 goals in 3 games, and I feel like an idiot. This has happened about 10 times. I just wrote it last night.
That's what he's doing.
I hammered him. I said, the guy's doing nothing.
Big game against Calgary.
Exactly. So he's due now, and it'll all turn around. And once again, I'll have to put up with the trolls on Twitter telling me that I was an idiot for criticizing him.
Chris, you mentioned him killing penalties. And I wonder sometimes if some of his energy is wasted on that. Like, killing penalties isn't a skill thing,
I don't
right?
know why you would
killing penalties is just working hard. I think they're not like I'm sure Daniel Carr or a 4th-line guy. You can send him out there who can skate and kill penalties. I always wonder, like, how much of Max's energy is being wasted killing penalties? It's hard work killing penalties, but it's not skilled work. So I wonder if he wasn't killing penalties, if it might make it easier for him when he's on 5-on-5 or on the power play.
And may I add here that killing penalties has suddenly become a place where in today's NHL this year, they're actually scoring goals. Shorthanded goals are up in the NHL like 70-80%, almost double previous years. So it's become a place where you're looking to score like Paul Byron.
Yeah, but he doesn't have the speed.
Exactly.
Max doesn't have the speed.
But Max
like
actually never gets any chances killing penalties. So it doesn't really make sense, because the environment now is try to actually score. So, yeah, send Paul Byron out there, a guy that does score, but Max never gets any shorthanded opportunities. So I'll double down on and agree with
And the
you
risk
on
of
that,
injury
Stu.
is higher killing penalties, too. You get a slap shot off the foot or whatever.
So going back to Daniel Carr, he was called up against the first game in Detroit last Thursday. He's 5 points in 3 games. Do you think that's enough to earn him a regular spot on the 4th line?
It should be. I mean, the thing with Daniel Carr, I tweeted during the game against the Blues, you notice him every time he's on the ice. He drives the net. He plays a lot like Brendan Gallagher. They played against each other as kids. They come from the same area in Alberta. I don't know what it is that whether it's Bergevin or Julien or somebody doesn't like something about Daniel Carr, and I don't know what it is. I know that some people in the Canadiens think he's too slow, but he's, Delorier isn't exactly a speedster, right? And Delorier runs around and hits people, which is great. He had 10 hits against St. Louis, but he can't put the puck in the net. And on a team that can't score, I think you need at least one guy on the 4th line who might actually have a chance of scoring when he gets an opportunity. And Daniel Carr has proven that when he can create his own opportunities and when he does get an opportunity, he can bury it. So I don't understand. If they send him back down, I'll be shaking my head. I would say I'd pull my hair out, but I got none left. But I don't get it.
Well, on the first goal, he won the puck in the corner and then went straight to the net and screened.
Yeah.
Can't do better than that, right? And I think the 4th line, when everybody's healthy, is going to have Daniel Carr on it with Nikita Scherbak and Charles Hudon, who will actually go down to the 4th line when Lehkonen returns.
That's a good 4th line.
That's a great 4th line. That's a 4th line that I hope philosophically Claude Julien and Marc Bergevin can look at and say, hey, it's today's NHL and you got to score from all 4. You can't let that 4th line just be a throwaway that tries to stay in the game like it has been with JDLR and 2 pluggers because of injury. That's a great 4th line, and I hope they keep it because I'm totally on board with Daniel Carr. Totally on board. I think he's a really useful hockey player, and he's exact same mold as Gallagher and Hudon and Shaw, and all 4 have one thing in common. They're tiny. But in today's NHL, it doesn't matter.
But they play big.
Because puck battling has changed, Chris. Puck battling used to be guys like you with good brawn, and now you're not allowed to touch anyone. Yeah. You're not allowed to get a stick on them, and you're not allowed to hold them. You're not allowed to use your physicality. So the way you win puck battles in today's NHL is, just like Julien said last night, you were there for Victor Mete, you win the puck, and you skate away from them.
Yeah, certain guys going to win it with their speed, quickness, and their hockey sense. Other guys who play physical are going to try and play that way, There's no more hook and holding, which Brian's right, there's no question about it. But, I don't like the game the way it is, but
you want it more
it's
physical.
the way it is. I just don't like the.
Well, you know what? I think the fans are agreeing with you.
I think they've taken too much away from players. Makes it almost impossible for defensemen now to.
Chris,
play
you know how I
guys.
think people
It's
agree
crazy.
with you, and what you're talking about is watch the reaction to Delorier when you're in the building, right? People love that guy.
Yeah.
He's running around, hitting everybody. You see him diving for the puck against St. Louis, trying to get there before Jake Allen. His determination, which is what you loved as a player, I'm sure, because that was your footprint.
I just like seeing that in all players. But again, just some of the stuff in the game, I just don't like. It's a little much with the. On the penalty shot the other night, Joanne kicked him back and made a great play. He lifted his stick and he ended up with a penalty shot. That was a really good defensive play. He barely touched him on the glove as he lifted his stick up. The stick rode up and just tapped his glove.
And you can't slash.
I think that's.
And that's the stick-on-stick they want.
Stick-on-stick, you can't.
Zero to do with it today.
Larry Robinson was in town about a month ago, and I sat down, I had breakfast with him, I was talking with him, and he said the thing that drives him crazy now, like slashing the guy's stick is a defensive play that you're taught. And there's a penalty the Habs were called, I think it was Andrew Shaw maybe a couple of games ago, where he slashed the guy's stick and the guy dropped his stick and he got a penalty. It's the guy's fault for not holding his stick hard enough.
Yeah, I don't like that.
And as Larry Robinson was saying, I don't know how they play defense today because you can't, you can't chop on the guy's stick.
This is why it's really, really becoming a speed game today's innings. There's just no question about it. If you're not carrying speed, you're almost done now. You know, when Jordy Ben gets wrong-footed, he can't do anything anymore. He can't grab a guy. He can't take one hand off the stick, try to slow him down a little bit. He can't slash him. He can't cross-check him. He can't do anything. If he's beaten for speed, it's over.
But Jordy Ben in his defense has learned how to angle guys well. He's still, he's played better than I think a lot of people thought he would.
Paul Byron was on the waiver wire because it wasn't a speed game about 3 years ago.
Yeah.
Paul Byron is now a 20-goal scorer. What's changed? He gets to use his speed. You see how he scored those goals against Detroit?
Yeah.
Even with the defenseman who can't touch him, and then by the time the breakaway happens, as he's throwing the puck 30 feet ahead, he's 3 strides ahead of the D.
Yeah.
It's not even a close race
Passes
anymore.
it to himself.
He passes it to himself. It's a beautiful technique.
Okay, I want to thank you guys for being here. That was an awesome show. That was a lot of fun. Thank you at home for tuning in. Leave your comments in the comment section below, whether it's on the Gazette or on YouTube, because we want to know what you think. My name is Adam Sesser, and I'll see you next Thursday.